Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 5 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of GT class or thereabouts racing cars. We will also be including some vehicles which aren't strictly speaking GT class, such as the Zonda R, the FXX, etc., and potentially vehicles such as this as well, the 1969 Camaro race car, and also the Challenger race car, among some others. Now, you could make an argument that this could be included in the Pumping Iron series as it is a classic muscle car, but it's technically not a real vehicle because it's a Polyphony Digital original, and also it wouldn't really be fair to put this alongside the other muscle cars because it's a full-on racing machine. And although some of the muscle cars are technically close to being race cars, like the Shelby GT350R, this is just a full-on race car, and that just wouldn't be fair to put it up against them. Now that said, how does it compare to these racing cars? Because surely a racing modified muscle car wouldn't stand a chance against something like a racing GTR or an Audi R8, etc. Well, to some extent that's true, because it depends on the circuit. On the right track, this car is actually brilliant. It's one of the best handling race cars in the game, in the GT or semi-GT class. But obviously on the wrong track, a muscle car will never keep up with a modern super sports or sports car based racing car. Now, surprisingly, for a muscle car, it's not that powerful. It's not underpowered, but it's not as powerful as you might expect. Fully tuned, this car puts out 583 horsepower. So not all that much compared to what you'd probably expect from a premium muscle race car. It also doesn't put out as much torque as you'd expect, unfortunately, at 547 foot-pounds. Thankfully though, it's extremely light. It weighs only 1,085 kilos. And that's a great thing for a muscle car, because if you can get all that power and all that torque into something that hardly weighs anything, it's going to be a monster around the track. And muscle cars are actually among the best track cars in the game if you set them up properly. There's a common misconception that muscle cars are bad around the track. They're actually some of the best cars you can get. And this car really proves that. It has fantastic handling, I have to say, tons of grip. The fact that it actually doesn't have as much power to deal with means that the handling is so much smoother and more beginner-friendly than pretty much any road-going muscle car. And its PP also isn't too high. It sits at 584, which I would say is pretty much perfect for this car. I wouldn't necessarily recommend, as with many vehicles, racing it at its fully tuned state. In the case of this car, I'd say probably anywhere between 500 and 575 PP would be a good level. Leave the weight nice and low. You don't really need to add any ballast to this car. And due to the fact that the handling is so good and it can get that high average speed around the circuit, you don't really need a huge amount of straight line power. Now that said, I would never recommend using a car like this on, say, the Le Mans, because it's just not built for that. It's built for cornering and for maintaining its speed, not for going up to crazy speeds. This car can give you fantastic laps if you choose the right track, such as here at Ascari, or potentially also city circuits like Monaco, where it also handles itself extremely well. On higher speed tracks, it just doesn't have the top end power. But that's not a knock against the race car, because neither does the road version. The road version of the classic Camaro is not one of the strongest muscle cars in the game. It does around 230. Now the top speed on this car is a lot lower than that, to be completely honest, but as I said, it's just not designed for top speed. If you're looking more for a top speed kind of muscle car, or at least top end acceleration, then you may want to go for the Challenger race car. But this version is definitely the superior of the two around technical circuits. Another one of the fantastic things about this car, apart from the fact that it's a premium, which is great for any car, let alone a racing model, is actually the price. It's very cheap at 215,000 credits. Which means it's around half the price, if not a third of the price, of many of the other GT cars in the game. Its best points are definitely its grip, its drivability, and its handling. It is supremely beginner friendly to people who aren't perhaps so used to driving race modified machines, and it has, as I said, just enough power to make it suitable for being a racing car, but not so much that you're constantly fighting against that power. So I would say, although you could say, oh, I wish it had more power, yeah, I do kind of wish it had more power because it deserves more, but with the car set up in the way it is, it has pretty much the perfect amount of power for most tracks. So if you haven't bought this Camaro, or the Challenger, which we'll also review later on in the series, you may want to consider it, because it's a very interesting alternative to some of the more obvious and more modern GT class machines, especially the Polyphony Digital original machines. And on the right track, you can shock people by just how good this car actually is. And another added bonus is, because it is a Polyphony original and also a premium, and also just because they decided to, you can paint it, which is a cool feature as well, which many race cars don't have. But that's it for this episode overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.